So you have to define races before you can even talk about what the myth of racial superiority is. You have to know what races are and where they came from, and have some kind of concept as to the origins and the lineages and all of that sort of thing. This is going to be a video that is very shamanistic, so if I lose some of you, well, then that's okay. It'll sink in at some point or another. If you do a check, let's start off with this. If you do a check to see how much of the population is, and we'll use the word Caucasian, but you know what I mean. If you do a check on that, then you find out that the Caucasian race, if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong, is in the minority of the mix of the different races. Okay, what is identified as the Caucasian race. It's not a majority like people think. People are so misinformed. If they did a little digging, they would find out certain things. So to use, let's say, a race or a color, if you get my drift, it's so juvenile, really. You can't get into, okay. How should I put this? Let's start with definitions. Let's start with color definitions. White, black, red, that type thing, of what the races are. So white is automatically brings up a certain feeling or picture that may be incorrect. There is no white race, not really. There is an Aryan race, and there's another word, okay, that is taken totally out of context because it's been demonized by the powers to be, by the the people that control things. They demonize words. Aryan, well, where does that come from? What does that mean? Well, immediately people might associate that with the Second World War and the conflict there in the German side, which declared that they were Aryan. They had an Aryan race, a perfect race, the race of the Aryans. That term was co-opted out of history. It was co-opted out of history. Excuse me, and I do have my water here. I have my canteen here, my cowboy canteen, man. It was co-opted out of history, the word Aryan. And the history of the word Aryan is a specific race, not a white race as you would think it. It is a specific race that came out of the Indo-Persian, and by Persian I mean Syria and Iran, Iraq, Iran, around that area. Go figure, huh? Why are we trying to take that land, the birthplace of civilization, major civilizations? It all came from that area. Indo-Persian, you think of Persians as, oh, like they're Arabs. No, they're not. Not in any way, shape, or form. They may dress tribal, okay, but they are not Arabs. Aryans were kind of a pure race. They were kind of a I'll just leave it at like a pure race. I don't really like to use that word. Let's say they were a major race. They were a major race. I want to be careful of my syntax here so that you can understand what I'm saying. They are of a major race, the Aryan race. Now we have all kinds of other races. We have the red race and the Mayan civilization and the Hopi, and we have the races that are over in, let's say, Ireland, the different mixes over there. There's many, many races. And let's keep in mind that this Aryan race, this Caucasian, and I'm using the term Caucasian instead of a color, is in the minority. It's in the minority compared to all these other mixes. Where did the idea of racism come from? Hold that thought, but I want to divert here. What is being perpetrated right now? What is being perpetrated right now? Think about it. As far as superiority amongst a certain class of people. And they have a label for that. So I digress, but what are the origins? What are the origins of this Aryan race, and what thoughts came out from that part of the world? What maybe advanced knowledge came out of that part of the world? You have to look at history. You have to look at history. And if you do, then you realize that was kind of the cradle of civilization, that whole Indus Valley, Mesopotamian area over there. There's a huge mix of races. The Hispanic, the Spanish, I could go on and on and on. The Negroid or the dark race, or it doesn't really matter, is the point. It doesn't really matter. That's the point I'm trying to make here. I'm not trying to give a talk on how I think one race is better than the other, like the Aryan race. No, I'm just telling you where it came from and how it is in the minority. So you can comprehend what I'm saying here without thinking that there's any kind of agenda. I don't have an agenda as far as the woke movement and the political and the patriot movement and all that shit. I'm a shaman. And I'm a warrior shaman. And you have to have that warrior element to be a shaman. You can't be a shaman without the warrior element. I will go so far as to say. I'm taking you on a trip here, people. Bear with me. I like people to think about things for a little bit before I start connecting dots. You have to connect the dots, all of the dots here, to see what I'm talking about in regards to the myth of racial superiority. There is no racial superiority in any way, shape, or form. We are all humanity. The only superiority is in the minds of people that have been put there by the filters, the imprints that have been placed upon the consciousness. What do I mean imprints, filters, consciousness? Well, whatever this world laid on your head in any way, shape, or form as far as social conditioning, and let's just take social conditioning. That covers the whole ball of wax, actually. That is a filter. That is a filter. And so you have many filters bombarding you and laid on your mind since birth, and still to this day. Filter after filter after filter. What are those filters doing? They're blanketing out, they're covering up the real emanation of who you are. Like when you were a child, before all this bullshit hit you, before you waded into the soup through birth, you waded into this soup, this world, which had a major, it was like you landing in the ocean and just splashing down, and here you are in this whole new world. And so filter after filter after filter is laid on your head. That's what a filter is. That's what a filter is. That's what, and some might call that armoring. Armoring yourself. Against what? Against your entrance into this thing we called a world. Because as soon as you get here, you start armoring yourself because you're being bombarded constantly since birth. Getting spanked, saying this is right or wrong, all that bullshit is armoring. As is belief systems. I'm coming from a very Taoist or Taoist shamanistic point of view today. To show the absurdity of certain ideas that come up in the mass consciousness propagated by the delightful, loving, archontic minds. Big sarcasm there. So when things come up like racial superiority, or let's say labeling someone with the, and I'll use the initials WS, W being a color that is very light, and S indicating lordship or rulership over others. Okay, those are the two definitions that you can take out of that. So we know what we're talking about here. Do you get what I just said? Because if you don't, rewind the video and watch it again. WS. Okay? That term that is being hurled about right now is totally made up. It doesn't exist. Where did this idea come from? Well, let's look back. Let's look at what they labeled WS. Oh, there's this little group of people down here in Tennessee or in the southern states that wear capes and white capes and burn crosses, and so yeah, that would be a definition in their minds. Okay, that would be a definition of the WS word. That would be one definition that would come to mind. Or how about those other guys? There's another group of people down south. Wow, this all seems to be originating down south here. That wave this flag that has a cross with stars, and they caused trouble back in whenever that was, in the 1800s, with a big civil disagreement, civil war. So what we are doing here is we are identifying where this term, this catchphrase, this WS, this naughty, naughty word came from, where it originated from, how it originated. Now, am I saying that the events that these people caused are not bad and not atrocious and completely racist? These two groups of people that they want to label, am I saying that that never happened and they didn't hang certain people and all that stuff? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. At all. Think about that. What I'm saying is that they took that concept, grasp this, they took that concept of these splinter groups and splinter factions that arise around the United States. Let's just say the United States right now. And what these dark entities do is they go, okay, well, let's take that out of history. Let's take that concept of these specific races. Okay, let's take that concept and let's run with that. Let's run with this, the hard feelings that one group had against another back in history, in different parts of our history. Let's take events that happened and we'll correlate that now. We'll use that because why? Because that's an anchor. Neuro-linguistic programming, that's an anchor. And what that does is immediately when they say the word WS, that anchors you right into that mentality or into that concept, okay, of factions that arose that were out and out, I'll use the term racist. They use those factions and the naughty words WS, or what has become the word to define that whole thing. They have taken that and they have superimposed it into society today against a certain group of people, the Caucasian people in general. The Caucasian people in general. Now you would think, and I would be the last person that you would ever think, since my heritage is part Native American and part French and part on that side, okay, and then on the other side I have Nordic, Viking type lineage and French lineage, more French lineage. So I got a lot of French in me and Indian and some English and some German from that side of the Berserker Viking type side. I have that side, and then I also have the indigenous side. Of course, all those people were indigenous in some way, tribal at least. So wouldn't you think that I would be the last person here to champion a certain side of one race superiority? There is no one race superiority. Get that through your fucking head. If you don't understand by now how they take and twist things so that you don't know whether you're coming or going, if you don't know that by now, it's time you started knowing it. The whole of history is twisted. Certain men were made to look like bad guys, like the leader in Germany in World War II. And am I saying he was not a bad guy? No, that's not what I'm saying. But they don't paint the picture, the bigger picture of who was controlling that bad guy. Who were the big corporations that were controlling that bad guy? Or who he had to kowtow to get funds and support in all kinds of ways. Material-wise, money-wise, all kinds of ways. Factories in the U.S. supplying the war machine, the German war machine. You can research this stuff and you will find out that the stuff that comes from the truth core, of which I am a part, and I am also a Kalika warrior, as far as the warrior end of the shamanistic definition. So this term is, and I always come full circle, the term, the syntax, the intention behind certain things is meant to push a button. You are a robot in the sense of if they can push your button, you're a robot. If a catchphrase or a term or a movement or any of that stuff pushes a button in you, you better figure out what the fuck that button is. Figure out what it is and figure out how that evolved. And is that part of the armoring? And is that part of the filter? The armoring and the filter that surrounds the pure individual. That's in my book, Listen to the Wind, Speak from the Heart, only I put it in different terms. I put it in terms of a clear glass of water and mud being poured into that clear glass of water. I've always been on the same page on the same level with different evolutions of, let's say, syntax and understanding. It's evolving. It's being, it's evolving in the consciousness that you were meant to have happen to you, or the way you were supposed to be, until all this garbage got dumped on you. I'm going to have to be careful about how I entitle this video. I think that the mythology of racial superiority is a very scholarly way to define this without offending which is another offending, whatever that means, because being offended lies with the individual. It doesn't lie with somebody trying to filter. There's that word again. Filter. Don't you love that word? Only when I'm making my coffee do I like that word. Otherwise, I guess there's other meanings too, but if you get my drift here, who wants to be filtered? Who wants your energy filtered, your consciousness filtered, your anything that you do filtered? And it has been filtered from birth, and so what we're trying to do here is wake you people up and realize, as Kalika warriors, we're trying to impart to you where that filter came from. You will never be a true warrior or a true shaman. You might never be. Some people are called to it, I do believe. And guess what? Nobody listens to us. Nobody listens to us. They'd rather go out there and circle jerk around some friggin' alternative thing. See, if you are a true Kalika warrior, if you think like I do, if you want to think like I do, or not like I do, like the mystery school, it's not about me. This is just knowledge. Or the shamans, the shamanistic point of view, if you want to learn more about that, or if you think that those ideas should be spread around, then why aren't you, and correct me if you're already doing this, well then this isn't for you. But how many of you go up to that share button? Because see, that's how word gets out. And I've never said this before. I've never talked about this, not really, but I noticed that little share button up there, and I use it all the time to share stuff that I see that might be beneficial to others, videos, whatever. You hit that little share button and shit, all kinds of stuff pops out. Facebook, LinkedIn, emails, everything. So what you should be doing, if you like this stuff, if you don't like it, well then don't do it. But if you like it and you think that it should be out there in the consciousness, and if you like how I speak as a truth core Kalika warrior, well then you should go on there and go, oh, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on blah-bitty-blah, Pinterest and Facebook and all this shit. I'll pop this up there and get that out there, because I think this person might be passing on some valuable information that people aren't they're not even thinking about it. They're falling into traps. It's a meme. It's like these memes that you see when you go to Pinterest. You see memes about things. There might be a picture of Jack Nicholson. He's supposedly saying a certain thing. Some of them are really good, and I am very into memes. But life is a meme. Propaganda is a meme. A certain way of thinking is a meme. That's what I mean by when I use the term meme. It's a meme. It's a anchor. It's a flash. It's a projection of pictures and sound and writing. You don't think that's powerful? So they use memes all the time. All the time. And this term, WS, that's a meme. And then you have BLM, that's a meme. There's a whole narrative that goes with that too. And so you're constantly being bombarded with memes that mean nothing. All they are is a distraction as to what you should really be thinking about. What should you really be thinking about? All that bullshit? Getting caught off on all kinds of trips and protests and defense mechanisms and anxiety and depression and fear and fear and fear. That's what they work on. Fear. So these memes that they put out there are just meant for that purpose. And for distraction and to create all those emotions I just talked about, anxiety and the whole bit. There is no racial superiority. Not in the least. And if somebody trumps that idea up out of the past or bad incidents that happened in the past, let's put a label on that. Yeah, man, run with it. Run with it. They'll buy it. Just like candy at the candy store. Just hand it out, man. They'll love it. Eat it up. People that do that are very robotic. They haven't bothered to look down, like the Chatty Cathy doll and pull the spring and go, what kind of emotions is that bringing up on me as anchored in emotions? Everything runs off of emotion. Everything runs off of emotion. Life is created by emotion. So if you learn how to manipulate emotion, well then you got it down, baby. That's what they do. They manipulate emotions. They manipulate their reality on you. Or they manipulate the reality that they want you to have. Go around to all these other sites out there that are supposedly telling you intel about what's going on in the world and all that stuff, and they're not even scratching the surface. They're not Kalika warriors. They're not in any sense of the term. That is a very endearing, special term. And I use it loosely. I probably use it too loosely. But it is a very meaningful, enduring, because there's a responsibility behind being a shaman and a warrior. There's a responsibility behind it. And if you're going to put yourself out there, well then you better be saying things that empower people, empower them, give them power. And I don't mean power in the bad sense. I don't mean power in the bad sense. Everybody thinks of power and is like, oh man, we don't like power, the power hungry and this and that. No, that's not true power. That's an illusion. True power is not having power over people. We can eliminate that one, okay? Or having power to manipulate events that harm humanity, not that kind of power. It's a different kind of power, and it has to be used in a different kind of way and discreetly. This is just to give you encouragement that there is truth behind the veil, truth behind the mass alternative and mainstream media consciousness. There's people that are trying to impart to you a concept that goes beyond all this conflict, so you can see what it's really all about. And if you want to partake in a certain conflict on a certain level, when you awaken as a shaman or as a Kalika warrior or as a teacher of ancient mysteries, it's a responsibility, but also, you know what, it's enjoyable. Because then you know you're really doing something for humanity. It's not some pie-in-the-sky good guys flying around doing all kinds of operations and all that stuff. Recon missions and blowing up this and that. That's not what it's about. It goes so far beyond that, it's unbelievable. The control, or let's say the power to influence, is a very strong thing, and it should be used in a specific way. It should be used coming from the heart, coming from a space of empowering people to their true consciousness, their true, what they were meant to be. The animistic quality of the earth person, the person that realizes the difference between the mysticism of some type of God that's out there somewhere that you can't see, as opposed to something you can see, feel, talk to, have conversations with, literal conversations with answers, with sensations that are answers, with revelations and different realities. Remember the Castaneda book, A Different Reality, I think it was called. He was far ahead of his time. I read Castaneda in the 60s. He talked about everything that is relevant. You had to be able to discern what he was saying, though. And if you didn't, you better read it and try to let it sink in. There's a lineage of shamans, and there's a lineage of people that were completely outside the realm of this reality so that they can convey things from other realities. Or have you look at things as a different kind of reality. A different kind of reality. Just think about those words. A different kind of reality. Reality is incumbent upon you. That's what it's incumbent upon. It's incumbent upon you to remove the filters. Once you remove the filters, what you think is a different reality is the real reality. It's always been there. But when you reach that point, it's a shock, and it's a sense of what they call enlightenment. Seeing beyond the veil. The bear went over the mountain to see what he could see. I think that's good enough. I've given you some information today, and I don't want to wail on and have this become boring or unable to follow. And I know sometimes it might be unable to follow. Just let the impressions from it and the words and the thoughts try to sink in so that you can kind of understand that not anybody can be a Kalika warrior. You can't just run out and go, oh man, I'm going to be a Kalika warrior. Well, no, that isn't how it works. How it works is that you study and that you learn and that you gain knowledge. You know, the big taboo, knowledge, knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. And it's a good kind of power. That's the kind of power you want to have, is a good power, used in conjunction with the earth energy towards the goodness of humanity and the way things should be. I'll leave it there today. Think on these things.